Hello, I'm Carina. Welcome to Scandinavia, where we make vegan, approachable Scandinavian treats. I now have my own bakery, but I grew up baking with my grandfather and my mom with Scandinavian heritage. My grandfather was from Sweden and told me a lot of stories about his childhood and simple upbringing, but also his growing love of food. And so I learned how to make Swedish meatballs, Limpa Bread, traditional butter cookies. And as I grew up and wanted to get healthier and try something different, I figured out how to make all those things vegan using simple replacements like vegan margarine, Earth Balance, for butter, and then flaxseed and tapioca for eggs, and then ways to just pump up the flavor so that you would never miss any of those dairy products. And I also like to do a lot of things gluten-free. It's very popular at my bake shop. One of the things that you'll see today, the cider donuts, are gluten-free. And I know that a lot of people need that and love that, so I try to incorporate a lot of that into everything I do. So today we're going to make traditional Swedish rye bread called Limpa. It's a very soft, tender bread that is half wheat and half rye, and it's spiced with fennel, cardamom, and citrus. But you can also change that up as you get to know the recipe. It's very easy to put together, put in the fridge, take out tomorrow and bake. And then we'll be working on the Peppercocker Cake, which is a Swedish gingerbread basically. It directly translates to pepper cake, but it's spiced with cardamom and ginger and cinnamon. That you can play around with the levels if you don't want it so spicy for a different time of year. And then we're making apple cider donuts, which are kind of combine my childhood in New England, where I used to get hot out of the fryer apple cider donuts with traditional Swedish apple cake. You bake these donuts in the oven, so very simple, and you can get the batter ready the night before as well. And they're just lightly spiced, fluffy, fruity, delicious. So I hope you'll join me, and hope these will bring comfort to your soul, and let's get going. All right, so now we're gonna make the Peppercocker Cake. I've got my bun pan here. Traditionally, you'd probably make it in a Ruisleipä pan, which is kind of like a sideways bun. But this is easy to get. It's nice and non-stick, but we're gonna give it some more assurance anyway by brushing on some oil. It's got some neutral grapeseed oil here. Make sure you get all the little ridges. Okay, and then it's going to dust in some flour, regular all-purpose flour. Tap it around. Really likes to stick on the bottom of all the ridges, so making sure you really get that. And then you'll have a nice, great looking cake at the end. All right, so we got that all ready. Put it aside, and then we can build the cake batter itself. I got a stand mixer here. You can do this with a hand mixer, but this is nice and easy. And first I'm actually gonna take this coconut milk and add my aquafaba. So this is the liquid from a can of chickpeas. Just open it up and pour the chickpeas in over a strainer so it catches the juice. This is 60 grams or about a quarter cup going into 600 grams of coconut milk, which is about 2.5 cups. And then I've got some vinegar, about a tablespoon. And I'm just going to let that sit. It's going to curdle, create sort of a buttermilk kind of feel. And then meanwhile, I'm going to combine This is vegan margarine, so substitute for butter. You can use any kind. My go-to is Earth Balance because I can find it everywhere, and they have a soy-free variety. And so just get this into my bowl. So 140 grams or about 5 tablespoons. And then I've got some vegetable oil here. Grapeseed is what I like to use. Any neutral oil is good. And my sugar. Now this is a white sugar. Usually when you find vegan sugar, it's going to be a little bit discolored because often what makes it white is like bone, mills made of bone, which I don't really want in my food. So I always look for an organic vegan sugar. But it works the same as regular cane sugar. All right, get this onto my mixer here. And I'm gonna start it on low so it gets combined. And then slowly turn it up. Let it go for a moment or so. All right, so we got a little air worked in here. I'm gonna go ahead and add molasses, 70 grams or about 3.5 tablespoons. It's gonna give that nice rich gingerbready taste and help lock in the moisture. And then some pumpkin, 96 grams or about 3/8 cup. You can also use plain cooked mashed potatoes. Just again, another thing to provide some moisture that will stay in the cake. All right, I'm gonna just mix this in. So I'm just scraping down the sides of the bowl to make sure everything gets well mixed. Especially that margarine likes to creep up the side. All right. I'm gonna add my all-purpose flour, 567 grams, or about 4 cups. I'm actually only going to add about half of it right now so I don't overmix. And then I'm going to add all my spices. So these are very Scandinavian spices. Tastes kind of Christmassy, but you can go all year round too, especially you can scale back the spices a little bit. I got cardamom, which is my favorite. It's almost black peppery without the spicy kick. It's got a floral citrusy note, so love that. Clove gives it like that rich, spicy flavor. Ginger for the kick, and because it is a Swedish gingerbread after all. And then some cinnamon to round it all out. And then I've also got baking powder, baking soda, and salt. It's all gonna go in. All right, mix this on low just till it's almost combined. In fact, pulsing it's not a bad idea. All right, I'm gonna continue to add the flour as well as the liquid that we combined earlier. And I love this recipe. It reminds me of the holidays, baking Swedish peppercocker cookies, which are little thin ginger snaps, with my mom, and Takes a lot of work, so this is a nice, easy reminder of those times and a taste of Sweden whenever I want it. All right. All right, start adding this. This is a pretty forgiving recipe, so if you do things, you know, slightly out of order, as long as you get that air worked in the first step, you're pretty good. And again, you can play around with the spices. If it's too spicy for you, you can scale back on the ginger and the cloves. All right, so things can get a little messy in the kitchen, so we decided to put this guard up to help keep the liquid in the bowl. And I just want to mix it just till it's combined. And I can do the last little bit by hand. And again, you could use a hand mixer for this. You could just cream the first part, and then after that you could do the rest by hand if you wanted. All right, you have to get rid of all the batter off of the paddle. And then we're just going to make sure it's all well mixed by gently folding with a spatula. You can smell those spices really coming alive with that coconut milk. It really already smells like the holidays and fall in general. All right. So I'm actually only going to use about half this batter. The rest can be made into muffins or another cake. So we're going about 3/4 of the way up because it'll rise nicely. And then you can just put this directly in a 350 oven and bake it for about 40 minutes. I start checking at about 35 when a toothpick comes out clean. And so it's going to smell delicious in here really soon. All right, now we're on to our Limpa bread, a really soft half wheat, half rye bread that I love for just about everything, and you can make it in a round or you can make it in a loaf, and it's I'm doing it again in the stand mixer, but really easy to mix by hand if you'd like. So pretty much everything just goes in the mixer, and really easy. So we're going to start with milk. You can use any non-dairy milk that you want. I'm using coconut milk today. You do want to, if you're going to do coconut milk, either water it down so it's about half full fat coconut milk and half water, or you can use the beverage kind of coconut milk that you get in your non-dairy milk aisle. But I use hemp milk a lot at my store. It's nice earthy flavor, so whatever you'd like. So we're going to go ahead and pour this in. And then we've got, this is Swedish syrup. If you go to IKEA, you can see this licorice syrup, which literally means a light syrup. It's made out of beet sugar. It has a sort of molassesy flavor, but not as deep and dark. But if you can't find it or you don't want to make a trip down there, you can use half molasses and half agave, or even like dark corn syrup would work. It's got a nice light caramely note that really accents the rye flour. Okay. And then to offset that a little bit, we got some lemon juice. And then we've got a little bit of that margarine again. This will help keep the bread nice and soft, easy to work with. If it's not quite this soft, you might want to melt it some so it incorporates into the dough easily. And then we've got rye flour, which gives it a nice nutty flavor and a denseness. And then bread flour, whichever is your favorite, that has at least 11% gluten so that you get a nice structure. We got cardamom, my favorite. And you can play around with the spices. If you find you don't like cardamom, you can leave it out. Or this next one, which is fennel seed, which I've ground in the mortar and pestle because I couldn't find it ground. But you can certainly mail order it ground. You can also use anise seed. And then lemon peel. Now this is something that changes from family to family. Sometimes you'll find orange peel instead, whichever is your preference or what you have at the time. And then we've got yeast. This is a tablespoon of instant yeast. Active dry should also work, the way that we're going to show you how you proof it. You don't have to put it in water first. All right, and we got some salt. And I think we're all set. So now we're going to mix it with the dough hook. And you want to use this because it has enough, it takes all the force that kneading this is going to take. But you can also do this in a bread machine, or you can knead it by hand. It will take at least 10 minutes of kneading, and it is kind of on the sticky side. We'll start it on low, go for 3 or 4 minutes, and then go to medium to high for 2 minutes. All right, so this has been kneading for like 6 minutes or so. I've gone every once in a while and scraped down the sides because with all that molasses and everything, it really likes to stick. But I think it's pretty good at this point. So I'll get it off of here. You can see it's very sticky, but that's okay. The rye flour needs a lot of time to soak up all that extra moisture. So just gonna make sure it's all well and mixed. And then you can cover it, put it aside to proof and rise for an hour or two. Or the nice thing about this is you can put it in the fridge and it'll be even easier to work with the next day. And it could develop a little more flavor too. And then it's just, this took like 10 minutes now, take another 10 minutes the next day to bake, and then you just gotta wait for it to rise. So really easy like that. So I'm just gonna put this aside, and I already have some dough ready and chilled and ready to work with. All right, so here I have my dough that I've already made. It's sat in the fridge, but I let it sit out of the fridge for a little bit to come to room temperature, so it's easier to work with. But you can see it's a lot stiffer. It's darkened a little bit. Some of that depends on the rye flour that you have. I usually like to use a nice dark rye, and so therefore it will get darker in color. But now I'm ready to just get it out onto my board, get myself a little bit of flour here. Because even though it has stiffened up a lot, it's still quite sticky. So you need a little bit extra assurance. So I just want to get it going and pliable. It's also letting out a little bit of the air, so it'll help your final bread. And then I like to shape into a ball by curling my fingers over the top, pinching at the bottom, and I do that several times. Again, some more flour if you need it. You could also do a very rustic loaf and just pat all this dough into a loaf pan. You might want to line it with some parchment paper. And then I just kind of shape the ball by pressing towards me and rolling towards me. Yeah, and it's a nice simple bread. It doesn't have to be perfect. Something you would find in a lot of households all through Scandinavia. You'd find some sort of version of this on a regular basis. All right, and then when you get it to where you want it, just gonna make sure it's still in a ball. And then you're ready to put this on a sheet pan and let it proof. All right, so you can either put some flour down like I'm going to, or you can use a small piece of parchment paper. And then just set this on top. We're gonna let this proof, and then we'll make a little pattern on the top right before it bakes. So a nice warm but not too hot oven is a good place to proof it, or on top of a stove. You just want to cover it with a towel, and so it doesn't get too dry on top. And about an hour to an hour and a half, and it'll, probably not quite double. It'll get out to about here, and then it'll be ready to bake. All right, so bread is proofing on top of the stove, and meanwhile in the oven our cake is ready. So I'm going to go pull it out. There we have it. So you can tell when it's done by either using a skewer and putting it in and seeing if it comes out clean, or you can tell by like the springiness when you press it on the top. So now you just want to let this cool off fully, and then you can turn it out and get it ready to serve. In the meantime, we're gonna work on our cider donuts. This is a recipe that was inspired by a classic Swedish apple cake, which is really moist and simple, easy to make for a snack. But I grew up in New England, and we get a lot of apple cider donuts there, and so I wanted to kind of combine the two. And it's easy because it's just a baked recipe and pretty quick to get together. It is a gluten-free recipe, so we're going to use a lot of different flours. You can use a pre-made blend, but I like a little bit more control. So let's get started. All right, so donuts, really nice and easy. They're going to be a baked donut. So you just need a donut pan. This is a pretty big pan. Sometimes you might find that ones that have 6 cups portions. That's great. This recipe makes anywhere between 12 and 18 depending on your pan size. First thing you want to do is get the pan greased and really get in all the nooks and crannies so that they come out easily. All right, and once again, we're going to use some flour. Any of the flours that are in the recipe will do. I usually like the rice flour, and you're just going to dust it over top. Tap it around, and then just tap it out. All right, now we're ready to make the batter. Again, this is one that you could do by hand. I do like to get a little bit of air worked into it, but with the paddle and creaming. But hand mixer or your hand just might take you 3 to 5 minutes to really get some air worked in. So we've got, again, our vegan margarine. Any kind will do. You want it softened, ideally not too soft. So just watch the temperature of your kitchen. And in there, and then some oil, again, to lock in that moisture. And we got sugar. And we'll get that creaming up. One thing you do want to do is, you got apple cider here. I like to reduce it. You can just use it straight out, but if you reduce it, you get a little more sugar concentration and a little more denseness in your finished donut. So all you have to do is put it in your pot, turn it up to high, and then you just let it boil until it reduces by half of the volume. And then you're going to measure out 314 grams, which is a little less than a cup and a half, and that will go in your finished recipe. So now we'll get this creaming. So my margarine was very soft. It doesn't take it too long to get very light in color. And so now I'm already ready to put everything else in. Got some tapioca starch here, which is a really fluffy flour that balances everything else out. I've got rice flour, actually, I have two kinds of rice flour. I just put the sweet rice flour, which has like a gummy stickiness to it. It's just a little bit, so it just helps to bind everything together. And then your main part of your flour is your white rice flour. That's gonna give the body and all the starch to the recipe. So get it all in there. Got brown rice flour, which will give, you can also use oat flour, which is my preferred. It gives a little bit of structure and fiber. Oat flour I really like because it's like smooth and buttery. And then we got baking soda, baking powder, salt. And we also have xanthan gum, which will help bind everything together and make sure your donut has the right structure at the end. Same thing with this. This is flaxseed. It's gonna act kind of like an egg replacer, but also has a lot of fiber in it, so it's good for you. All right, all that in there. All right, so you're just mixing until it's combined. The nice thing about gluten-free is you can't really over mix it. So if you need to walk away for a moment, you'll be all right. All right, so then we just need to add our reduced cider. So now I'm gonna measure out like I said, a little less than a cup and a half. Or if you're weighing, which is how I like to do it, you do 314 grams. And then you can, it's nice because you can do a lot of things at once in the same measuring cup. The other thing you could do is if you really want the concentrated flavor, you can get, you could try using like a natural apple juice concentrate and then adding half the amount of water that it says to. And that way you can make this any time of the year when you can't find good cider. And a couple more things. I like to add a little dash of nutmeg. It just helps bring out the flavors in the apples and give you a little bit of warm spice. So it's like a couple of pinches or 1/8 of a teaspoon. That way it can quickly get overpowering, so you don't want too much. All right, and then I have chopped apples here. You usually want to chop them pretty fine so that it blends into your donut very easily. You can grate them, but if you do that, you want to squeeze out some of the juice because keeping it bigger like this means that it doesn't come out as easily, but grating it, you'll water down your batter pretty quickly. All right, get that all in there. And just want to barely mix those in so they don't get broken up too much. And there's your batter. So it is pretty soft and liquidy right now. You do want to give it a little stir and make sure there's nothing hanging out on the sides. And so now you want to let this sit in the fridge at least 6 hours overnight is awesome. And again, makes it something easy to do as long as you can plan ahead a little bit. Gluten-free flours need a little more time to absorb the liquid and create structure. So that's why we do that. Whereas if you were using all-purpose flour, which you could try in here of the same weight, it has a structure where it can create bubbles of liquid and you can use it more quickly. So we're gonna put this aside and get the batter I have ready to go. All right, so I have my batter that I let sit overnight in the fridge. You can see it's a lot thicker now and much easier to work with. So now I can get them ready to bake. I got my oven preheated to 350 and I got a nice disher here. It's very easy to get everything level this way. This is a 2-ounce scoop. Again, it kind of depends on the size of your pan that you're using. This is a nice size that it bakes in 20 minutes and it's a nice snackable size. So I'm gonna just roll over the top of the batter, gently press against the side. I'm okay with a little bit of a heaping scoop. And then right in. And these are like one of my customers' favorite. They taste like they're fried, but yet because they're packed with all these apples and flax, they feel just healthy enough that you can indulge in one. All right, and then I just like to press them into the pan just a little bit. They'll probably will cover up the holes anyway, but it's nice to start out that way with them poking through and making sure you get it a little bit evened out. All right, we're ready to go in the oven. All right, so as you can see, our bread is nice and risen. It's ready to bake. It's 1.5 to 2 times the size. And so you can bake it like this, but it might crack weirdly on the top. So to give somewhere for the steam to go, I just want to make a little slit in the top the way that you might find on a baguette or another artisan bread. So I'm gonna just gently brush across the surface with my knife. You can just keep it at once, or you can make an X if you'd like. I think 1 looks nice. So now I'm gonna put this in a 350 oven for 30 to 40 minutes until it's nice and golden on top. It feels firm to the touch and slightly hollow. It's not gonna be as hard as like a sourdough or a baguette. So there we go. All right, so everything's out of the oven. We got our hot donuts with some cinnamon sugar coating. We got our fresh Limpa bread, nice and steamy hot. And then our Peppercocker cake. You can put a glaze on the top of this if you'd like, just powdered sugar, water, and a spice of your choice. But it also is nice and simple, just as is. Thank you for joining me. Find me at Carina's Bakery on Instagram and carinasbakery.com. I hope you enjoy and find all of this easy to make and inspiring vegan recipes And tune in next time for all things marzipan, from marzipan tarts to princess cake and things that will wow and delight.